Hey guys, welcome to Electronic Dance Money, your number one business resource for making money as electronic musicians and producers. All right, what's up everyone? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Electronic Dance Money. This is episode 8, and today is going to be an awesome episode. My guest is Adam Reifsteck. He is, I would say you're probably a, very much so a guru in artist development, which is, I think we were actually talking on the phone the other night, and it's something that's kind of dismissed by a lot of producers. And I would say a lot of record labels as well, which is, that's, I think, a big part of, if you want to be a full-time producer, especially touring artists, you got to go through the artist development phase. You got to get into branding. I think branding actually, that's the third episode I did on this podcast. And that so far has been, that one continuously gets more and more plays than anything else. So I think producers are interested, but I don't know if they know where to go or what step to take. You're heavily involved with artist development with Teknofonic, which we'll get a little bit more into Teknofonic in just a little bit. But let's go back into your background a little bit and back up a few years, because you've been involved in electronic music for how long now?
If you count college, I guess. Well, even before that, I guess I had my first synthesizer when I was 16 years old. So I guess, over 20 years now. So
yeah, so you've seen it. You've seen it all. You've been there from almost were you there in the late 90s? That whole underground rave culture scene.
Yeah, well, I actually didn't rave. I wasn't let out of house. I was kind of like a good kid, or at least my parents sort of kept the reins on that. And in college, it was funny because my undergrad's in music technology, so I was doing really getting into synthesizers and stuff when I was in high school, and so it kind of led me to go for a degree in music technology from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. So when I was there, I was getting really into sound recording and sound design and that sort of thing, kind of finding a way to combine both my classical training as a pianist with electronic music. So I was in electroacoustic, as they call it, bands. So we kind of combined electronic music with classical instruments. So it wasn't necessarily like dance music, but I was actually, going to clubs and stuff too when I was in college. So that's kind of where I really, that was kind of my background, and wanted to find a way and to incorporate dance music with classical music. And then that was kind of shunned upon at school. So I was still kind of experimenting with the early days of Ableton and with Reason. So on my own side projects and stuff like that. And when I did my master's I went full on classical music and did composition. So then after I graduated, I moved to New York City, and I was determined to start my career in classical music and as a composer. It's interesting. I think as a career in music, it kind of takes you all over the place, really. I was actually still doing some recording, and I was actually kind of like a DIY artist in a sense. Like I was incorporating electronics with my classical music, and I was recording as well. So then I started to get gigs with some ensembles and just doing more as a recording engineer. So started to do that kind of stuff. And then I was still kind of figuring out a way how I can bridge the gap between the two. And then, I was still going to the underground club scene here in New York, really had a passion for that and that type of music. So I was kind of determined then. I kind of reopened Ableton and said, I'm going to kind of start doing more dance type music.
Did you find yourself going to the trance scene coming from
Yes.
an orchestral? Yep. I would assume so, especially late 90s, early 2000s, that was the trance heydays lots of violins and orchestral instruments. So yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I assume that's where you would just immediately be drawn to.
Yeah, I guess I would be a trance music producer. I mean, that's kind of, most of my stuff is kind of heavily influenced by trance. There's still some more like that IDM kind of weird stuff in there too, with my own music. So I wanted to go all in and produce and stuff. So, this was probably like 2012, 2013, where I really started to dive in back into Ableton and started producing my own music. So I guess there was really the only option that you really had is to get your music out there. Really, I mean, I was kind of releasing it on SoundCloud and stuff, and got a little bit of traction, but really not much, visibility. So, the artist friends that, I was networking with and meeting and talking to other DJs, and they're saying, well, you just have to DJ. You have to get out there and start performing. So I was like, okay.
I guess.
Yeah. So I did that, and I kind of did a few gigs, and I could kind of pull it off for a little bit, but it just wasn't my thing. And so I got together with some producer friends and said, I'm kind of more of have the audio engineering background and the mastering and stuff, so let me just master your tracks and stuff like that. And then so I did that, and then I was like, well, how are we going to get these out? We're going to shop them to labels and stuff like that. And so we were shopping, they were trying to get signed to different dance labels, and I was trying to get signed to different dance labels. And I actually had a really big deal, which I can't talk about and this was another thing that we kind of get into, and kind of my trajectory of anti-label is that I got picked up by a pretty well-known label, and we were doing this. They were going to do a whole project, and then, as most things happen, something else happens and you get dropped by the label. So I got dropped. My project got dropped, and that will never see the light of day. And I signed one of those lovely contract things where it's called an NDA, or a non-disclosure agreement. So yeah, I'm kind of being vague about it, but unfortunately I can't really reveal too much on that.
Right.
But so I was like, saying, so to my friends, I had this thing happen, and they weren't having trouble getting signed. So I was like, why don't I just start a label? Can't be that hard, right? So in 2015, I started Teknofonic Recordings, and since then we've had over 250 releases, many of which have charted in the Beatport Top 100, racking up thousands of plays across the streaming services. So yeah, it was pretty successful in that sense, as a record label can be these days. I mean, with everything going to streaming services, it's certainly, with being a small boutique label, you kind of have to do other different things. So, I mean, most of my income as a producer is now just with mastering, and now with artist coaching. So that kind of was interesting, because now that led into the artist coaching, and kind of this concept of artist development, I guess, kind of began like a half a century ago, with, departments of record labels would be dedicated, to cultivating artists and, and branding. And it would be in their contracts, where they would, you'd have an A&R rep kind of scout talent, and then they'd pick them up. Part of the contract is that they'd kind of develop their brand and their artistic identity, and how they're going to sell their music and their product and that sort of thing. Kind of became later known as the 360 deal. So a 360 deal is essentially what most of the major labels offer the artists, is that they'll take a percentage of everything, basically, hence 360.
Oh.
So it would be publishing, touring, merchandise, the actual record sales, and that sort of thing. So all your major artists are kind of in that 360 deal model, which is terrible for artists. It's a bad deal for artists. So, but now we're kind of in this DIY, do it yourself world with the internet. And I think with streaming services and the cost of technology, I know, because I officially kind of started my professional career when iTunes hit the market, right? So,
okay.
So that was when everything went to hell, right? So, And things just started changing dramatically, and hence why labels don't really make money these days. And they're kind of doing more and more of these 360 deals, especially in electronic music. When I got back into electronic music, really like labels like Monster Cat, some of these other ones that are more artist friendly were starting to pop up around 2011, 2012, where, they would do non-exclusive agreements where they would sign individual tracks and kind of help promote artists. Record labels can now no longer invest in artist development. So when you're approaching labels, they expect now that you have your shit together, that you have a following, that you have, your brand identity. And, it's not just your music. They're not signing you just for your music. They want to know that you can, sell, that it's going to sell. So there's more to it than just the music. And I think kind of starting Teknofonic and realizing this when the artists were coming here to the label, and they were sad at the results of the label. Like the artists that do better on the label are the ones that are, out there looking for other opportunities. I mean, Teknofonic was getting, helping with promotion, a little bit of promotion here and there, but it's really now it has to be a collaborative effort because labels just don't have the money to invest in artists anymore. So it's more of a collaborative process now. So the artists that weren't releases that weren't as successful, the artists were coming to the label and expecting the label to do everything. And that's just not how it works anymore. So I was seeing this gap where there was a lot of knowledge out there with production, and there's tons of online schools and stuff to actually learn production, but nobody's really teaching like the career aspect or the artist development. There's still this myth that a label or a manager will do this for you, and that's just not simply the true. A lot of the artist development is now either on the responsibility of the artist or to kind of learn themselves. If they sign with a manager, depending on the manager you sign with, some managers are now taking on that artist development, that career development thing now that the record labels used to do, but not all managers will do that. So it's finding, if you don't want to do it yourself, that's a thing. You have to. I mean, do it yourself these days, at least to get to the point where you can get a manager that it's going to be worth it, because you're going to have to give up at least 20% of everything that you make with a manager. So that's kind of where the trajectory of Teknofonic over the last year is kind of, seeing this knowledge gap between, okay, you know how to produce great music, but then how do you get to the next step and how do you turn it into a career? And, there's a lot of bad advice out there on the net. So you're kind of left to trying reading blogs, or, there's good podcasts out there like this one but they're now just starting to crop up. I mean, this is kind of like a new thing where I think we're getting to the point where we're oversaturated in there's 40,000 tracks that are released every single day on the streaming services.
Yeah.
So how do you stand out? And that was kind of the precipitous with Teknofonic, is kind of, I was doing this on a one-on-one coaching level with artists. And then, so I kind of opened up the platform and kind of wanted to build this artist development community where artists can come and share ideas, as well as professionals. So I invite professionals in to, do interviews and stuff, and do sort of live master classes. I mean, the technology that we have now available, podcasts are great, but I think webinars too is super helpful to have, like these.
The video format is huge.
So here's what's interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day. Like, I've been in New York now. I just hit past 10 years. So I guess I'm a New Yorker, and I'm gonna.
You got the stamp of approval.
Yeah, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, right? But I when I first moved after I graduated, I was like everybody else. It's like, where do you go? You either go to LA or New York, and LA wasn't my thing, and at least at the time, I had a safety net where if I failed, my parents were living in New Jersey at the time, and now they actually moved to North Carolina. I'm self-sufficient at this point, so I don't really need them. But
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like at that time, so I did decide, well, LA wasn't really, an option. So New York is the next hub, right? So, but now we live in the internet age where you don't really need to be in New York. But I don't discredit, moving to New York. This was like kind of the best decision in a way because I had opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise. But not everybody is cut out for the big city life. And that doesn't mean then you won't have a career. So, but also you need to figure out where you can find resources that will help you develop, do that kind of, there's, do the artist development because now, it's up to you as artists to kind of figure that out, and you need help from somebody. So, so that was kind of the precipitous for Teknofonic and kind of opening it up as more of an artist development community beyond just a label.
The mission statement behind Teknofonic is so great, and I think that's really evolves and develops from the creator yourself. You've gone through all these different stages through music. I think everyone kind of follows these same life stages through their career. Some of them, it happens a lot quicker and they have a lot of success very shortly. That's where you'll see artists go from nobody to someone in 5 years and they're very young. They just blow up. And I feel like a lot of that does have to do with the kind of network that they have in place, or they meet just the right people and they are able to kind of build a team from the ground up. Would you say that has a lot to do with artist development? As far as like producers kind of taking this role on for themselves, do you think diversifying their team in all these different aspects where, okay, I've got a good team for promotion, I've got someone who can do all my, or maybe not even do all my branding, but can make all of my cover photos, take photos of me at shows. Like, do you think that building this sort of team really enhances a producer and makes them stand out from the rest and can really up their artist development?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of producers don't have the finances or the ability to do that. And I think more and more you're going to see, just because of the nature of streaming, you're going to see if people do it artist development with you, they're going to be asking for more, like percentage. Like an artist manager, for example, would do 20%. So then it's like, how many people do you get involved until the point where maybe you don't get anything, right? So there's a danger in that too. So I think it's just, it is finding the right team. It does take a village. And if you want to be a producer artist and be a performer as well, it definitely does take a village to make that happen, and having a bunch of different team behind you. But that's not necessarily a requirement too. If you do have like kind of the entrepreneurial spirit, then it becomes more of a question of a time management thing than anything else.
100%.
And so I guess and I guess that would be my advice too, is like, I definitely see that for my career trajectory, I didn't want to be a performer. And I was more of an entrepreneur, wanted to do my own thing and do it my way. But, I still have helped from coaches and mentors along it. But the thing is that if, with getting the right team, kind of have to build it over time. It's not like you kind of go out and say, okay, I'm going to find a manager, I'm going to find a social media expert, I'm going to do all that, and I'm going to hire an agent and then do that. Like, I think you kind of need to do that over time and sort of.
I think a lot of those people find you too. It kind of happens naturally.
Yeah.
If you force it and go out looking for someone,
it doesn't.
A lot of the time you're going to get someone that you really don't want to be involved with. They're either shady or they just don't do what they say they're going to do.
Right. Yeah, and then you hear stories, with all the time about artists getting screwed over by their managers or even the labels. Like, I don't know, you can edit this out, but Martin, I don't know if it's something we can talk about, but it's Martin Garrix with Spinnin' a few years ago. And I think there's still this kind of myth that, especially in electronic music, I think is that you get signed to a label and then suddenly your career takes off. And that's just not how it works. Your music isn't enough. And I think what you're seeing, what a lot of aspiring producers see, only like the 1%, like the Martin Garrix and the Marshmello and the big time, but they've had like a long time leading up to that point.
Yep.
So
it's the iceberg. It's the iceberg effect.
Exactly.
Where you just see that peak, but under it is there's so much more that was involved before. Because it seemed like Martin Garrix blew up overnight. You just really didn't see what he was for the 4 years leading up to that, 5 years leading up to that.
And that was the other thing too, is like getting the right team, because Spinnin' really did take him for a ride, and not having that education. And that's kind of where Teknofonic comes in now, where we're kind of positioning ourselves as like, I've gotten screwed over in my career over the past 15 years many times, and I don't want artists to repeat the same mistakes. So, because it is tough. This industry can be really cutthroat, but if you kind of educate yourself on the business side, it's super important, and you can actually get to where you want to go faster if you kind of, open yourself up to learning opportunities and listen to podcasts like this, or
right. I think there's this shift in the industry that I've seen just within the past 2 years, where a lot of producers are moving into this educational realm, and a lot of big producers in the scene are actually creating courses to help develop with that sort of thing. Now, I want to just kind of give a nice rough definition of what artist development is for producers, because they're hearing us talk about this thing called artist development. It can be a blanket statement. Obviously, I think a lot of it has to do with branding, social media presence. So it's kind of everything outside of the actual production and releasing of music. Well, I mean, you could even consider releasing music as part of the artist development phase, especially with promotion.
Yeah, so I guess it basically is like it's sort of like, I guess artist development is the equivalent of a business plan, right?
Yeah.
If you're running a business, and all businesses kind of have to have a business plan, like mark out your goals and your kind of your objectives and stuff like that. And then if you're doing it yourself, it's kind of like daily practice, for example, like practicing in your DAW, creating and recording the music, growing your fan base and developing your image online, and handling all the business and the paperwork and stuff. Because face it, you're a content creator, so you're a business. So you're in the business of creating content,
entertainment, entertainment.
So you kind of have to think of yourself as a business, and and it's a weird concept. It kind of took me a while to kind of wrap my head around that. It's like, but I'm a person,
Yeah.
How does that?
Not an entity.
How does that work? Not an entity.
Yeah.
But you really kind of have to especially if you're doing it yourself and you don't have like a manager or a mentor, or you're just starting out, your best friend or something, or your girlfriend or boyfriend, although I don't recommend dating other musicians. I made that decision early on. So
I've seen it get rough. I've seen it be very successful, and then I've also seen it end in divorce.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it can work, but needless to say, like, you either have two options: do it yourself or get help from, and start finding people that you connect with. And that's why we're seeing a lot of these artist collectives popping up a lot. Because I think, I love the saying, it's so cliche, but a rising tide lifts all boats. But I think the important thing of even being an entrepreneur and doing a lot of the stuff yourself, you're still networking and collaborating with people.
Right.
But, you're kind of handling the business aspect, like the finances, and like, I mean, at the end of the day, you're responsible for yourself, right? So it takes a lot of discipline. And I think if you're really passionate about this, you have to kind of sit down and like be very disciplined. And
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of for me. I don't really need somebody to kind of tell me when I need to work. Sometimes I need like my partner to tell me when I need to stop working. But
yes, yeah. I think
yeah.
that's it for producers a lot of the time too, is like they don't need to be told when to work. It's more when you need to stop working. And also kind of the time management of it. A lot of the time producers have absolutely no thought into time management and how they need to manage their time. And so they end up working on things that don't really help them in the end, or just end up wasting time thinking that they're actually doing something beneficial.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important to find a community of like-minded artists. And I think there's kind of this, there's this kind of, it's a little, I think people need to kind of get over themselves, to be honest, because I think we're not really competitors. Because if you think about it, and this kind of goes back to your branding and all that kind of stuff, like really, we're not in competition because your music is not exactly this, unless you're like trying to copy somebody and like ripping off loops and stuff, or and not adding your own creative twist to it. What you're doing is completely different from someone else. Your story is totally different. And that's what I talk about. The three components of a successful brand is obviously the music, and then it's your story, and then who you're trying to reach. So when you have all those three things working, and you can't have one without the other, that's when the magic happens. And and that's kind of what you have to strive for. And it is a balancing act. And especially in this DIY culture that we live in. So
I really like that. That's a perfect way to sum up how artists should be looking at branding, is to what's your story, who are you trying to reach, and what was the third one?
And obviously the music.
Yeah, the music. Okay, yeah, I guess that's probably one of the main ones.
Yeah, that one's easy. I mean, right?
Yeah,
you already have the music. Now you have to kind of tell your story. And I think a lot of people kind of confuse what a brand is like. A brand is not your logo. It's not your website. Mm-hmm. Those are your assets, or like things that make up your brand. The brand is another way of thinking of like who you are. I think in many ways it's almost easier for musicians and artists to, I think they overthink the concept of a brand. It's like you just need to tell your story and tell it in an engaging way. And it's not just your music. I'm sorry to say, like, I think people realize if anybody's put a track out there on SoundCloud and they get maybe 5 or 6 plays, know that just throwing it up on SoundCloud doesn't mean anything. Maybe like your mother and maybe 3 of your friends listen to it. It really comes down to being able to tell a story, especially in the age of social media. I mean, people are addicted to their phones, and social media can be really negative, and we've seen the effects of that, but it's also can be a great way for artists to tell their story. And I think I talk about a lot about this with my artists. There's this mindset that artists have, is that why they don't kind of document their journey. And I think creators need to document their journey. I mean, we're all creatives.
Do you follow Gary Vee?
Yeah.
I mean, he is recording everything he's doing, and because of that, he has so much content to share his story and what everything he's doing.
Obviously, you can go overboard, but but it's finding that happy balance. But I think why. So I guess I kind of thought about this the other day. Like, why don't most creators actually document their creative journey? And I kind of boil it down to like 4 different things. One is they don't have time. 2, they don't have the means to do so. 3, they're private people and don't want to share things publicly. Or 4, they don't know why they should be doing it. And I think the first 3 are actually excuses. So you can kind of get over that. But the 4th thing is why. I don't know why they're doing it. Like, how could this be useful to their careers? And I think when you create a content, whether it's like doing a live stream in your DAW or something like that for other producers, you have to think about who you're creating this content for, and that's where you can be mindful of the content that you're creating. And I think the big thing is that it has to be authentic.
Yep.
You can't just go out there and say, like, I'm going to do a cooking show. Like Marshmello has a cooking show now. But that is not, that's him. So you have to, if you suck at cooking, don't do a cooking show. I know it sounds like we're getting away from the music, but let's be honest. I mean, like, really, like, it's the longevity ends up being the music. I mean, obviously your music has to be top notch and awesome. Otherwise, you can have a very interesting brand, but if your music sucks, it's not going to work. And then vice versa. If your music's awesome, but your brand sucks, and
it's not going to last. You're just not going to, or you're just not going to ever pick up. That's the thing. Dude, I've seen countless producers who are they're writing unbelievable music. Their production is unreal. Their mixing is amazing. And sometimes their mastering is even great. And you wonder, why do you only have 500 followers? Or if that, why do you only have 100 listeners a month? And a lot of it has to do because that they aren't telling a story. They aren't telling anything. This is one thing why I love albums, and I wish albums weren't a dying breed. And I think with streaming, it's just a lot more people are putting out singles.
Yep.
But the thing about streaming is if you can make a shorter song, you're more likely to get a full playthrough with that. And I mean, songs are getting shorter. I actually just read an article on this. Songs are consistently getting shorter and shorter. That's obviously a lot because of radio play, but a lot because of streaming now. If you can get all the sections in a shorter time frame, you're going to keep people more engaged because our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. If you can write an album that's only 30, 40 minutes long, that's got 10, 15 tracks in it, they're all about 2.5 minutes each, you can tell a good story in that. And it's the reason why, like, Cosmic Gate, one of my favorite artists, same with the Glitch Mob. These are artists who don't put out a lot of singles. They're mostly album-based artists, and they're fucking huge. And, I mean, you look at the Glitch Mob, they don't have hundreds of releases. I think they might be under 50, if that. They might have a little bit more than that, but a majority of their stuff are from albums and extended EPs. There's a reason why they have such big following, and people are so engaged and entertained by them. And if you find a Glitch Mob fan, they've listened to all their albums 10 times. And it's because their albums, they just go through this amazing story, and you can hear that story within the music. And that is so important that you can't really convey that through a single track. You can convey that through a DJ set. I think DJ sets can be pretty beneficial to artists. But not as much as albums can. And a lot of albums can be mixed in, so they can be 45 minutes and, the tracks are going in and out of each other. But you can convey an entire story through an album, especially one with original vocals as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that concept of songs getting shorter and how streaming services are kind of dictating the evolution of music in a way. I mean, I read an article on it. I can't remember which one. I mean, we may have even read the same one, but I was thinking to myself, it's like yes and no, because I feel like so I think what if you're listening to this as a producer that's just starting out, and you hear conflicting things where people are like, be true to yourself, create content that you want to, and don't worry about what other people think and stuff. Yeah, that's part of it, but you have to kind of,
there's a fine line you gotta walk there. It's such a fine line. I mean,
and I go back to this concept of a content creator, because that's what you are, is, and with the way the streaming is like, if you can, what actually I think a lot of successful artists are doing now is creating songs just for streaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of like your entry point with building your fan base, like getting noticed on some big playlists with a shorter song. People start seeing, listening to your music and then start checking you out and start following you and then kind of developing, into fans because I think that's kind of like your entry point to developing fans. So then you can save the more interesting stuff for your fans and then people that are actually supportive of you and who you are and your story and then you can do like longer albums and more longer tracks
Yeah.
and release just for your fans. So if you have like I like to say like you don't there's this mindset with the music industry where you have to reach everybody, but you really don't. I mean, if you have a core group of, let's say, if you get 500 people to spend $100 on you per year, that's $50,000. And if you can get, there's like a famous blog article about the 1,000 true fans or something like that a couple years ago, where if you get 1,000 people to spend $100 on you a year, I mean that's six figures now. So
Yeah.
it really doesn't
money.
take a it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to be famous to actually make a living.
You just need dedicated fans.
Yeah.
There's do you know, I think his name's Chris Greenwood. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, I think I've seen his ads floating around.
He does he works with a lot of producers and musicians kind of. I'm not sure if he focuses on like singer-songwriter people. He has an ebook though that I got that was about how to chart in Billboard and how he started out as an artist. He unlocked the secret, which I'm dying to get him on my podcast. I'm gonna slowly start reaching out to him and try to get him on the show because I'm a part of his email marketing list, his newsletter, and he shares so much content on there for artists. He figured out how to do kind of what you're talking about, but through crowdfunding. So he crowdfunds all of his albums, and ever since he started crowdfunding. His first album charted in the top 100 on Billboard. And so this whole ebook is about how to chart on Billboard, and it's all about, if you create these products for fans to purchase, and you can use that to fund your album, they're already more engaged with your content. They've put money on you. They've invested in you. So when the album comes time to release, they're way more willing to stream it, share it, and buy it. And that's how you can get people. If you can get 1,000 people that are dedicated to do that have all spent $20, $25, all 6 of his albums have charted on Billboard from doing this process.
Yeah, and the key though to that is making sure your music is registered with SoundScan, because if you do a crowdfunding campaign and you just press like a bunch of CDs, you have to get that. You have to register that with SoundScan. A lot of distributors don't do that. So I think CD Baby actually does.
Yeah, they do.
DistroKid, I don't think does. But you can actually register yourself. You just go to Nielsen's website, and that runs the SoundScan, or I forget what the website is off the top of my head. But just Google SoundScan.
I'll put it in the show notes for people.
Yeah, just Google SoundScan, because if you're it's free to register your music on SoundScan, but that's how you get charted on Billboard, because they're using that. So yeah, I mean, it really isn't that hard. I think, especially in classical music, I think that's even easier to get charted on Billboard, because it doesn't really take much to get on Billboard as a classical musician these days. So, but that's another story for a different podcast.
Having your core fan base is huge. You see a lot of these producers who have hundreds of thousands of likes and follows, and a large majority of those, I guarantee, are purchased likes and follows from 10 years ago, when every promoter and record label thought, we need to buy all of your likes so it looks like you have a large following to get you on these festivals and whatnot. Which is that, buying likes and follows is a bad idea now, in my opinion. It just doesn't get you anywhere. You have people have expectations for you as soon as they see a big number, and it almost never follows through.
Yeah, and with that, so there's other that I've seen recently, don't get sucked up into like some of these courses that for musicians where it says, get penny likes, in you can actually, it's pretty easy to throw up a Facebook ad, and what they basically teach in some of these courses for musicians is that you basically target countries that have the very low cost for Facebook ads. So like if you target India, for example, you can get a ton of likes for like under a penny or something like that, which is a complete waste of money in the long run, because those people aren't engaging with you. I think promoters especially, and I know a lot of promoters, they're not looking at how many likes you have. They're looking at engagement. So if they see an artist with 100,000 likes on their Facebook page, but there's like no engagement,
there's
on
two
their posts,
comments and a couple of likes,
but then there's a producer that has like maybe 1,000 or even 5,000, but it's ton of engagement. They're gonna book that artist over the other artist, hands down, because they know they have engagement, and people are following them. So not just following, actually engagement is where it's at now. So
what now? Sorry, let's transition. I want to transition really quick over to more on the record label side of things. I think you and I are both in agreement, because this is something I tell clients all the time. I'm like, I think self-distribution might be a good route if you can build the right team for promotion. If you can get enough people to share your music, and get people to add your tracks to playlists, you're in the right direction with self-distribution, because you're getting all the money for that, plus all the added benefits of having fans. However, I think some record labels still play a vital role. The right ones, I should say, like Monster Cat, I think is a phenomenal record label. I think they're doing all the right things. They're innovating. But with that, record labels are shying away from artist development deals, but I do think there are still some that do sign. Like, I'm sure there are big ones, like if Warner Bros sees an artist where they're like, we can do a lot with this person, let's take them under our wing and do all artist development. And with artist development deals, producers, if you don't know what those are, it's basically you sign all the rights to your music away. You have to create a certain amount of music for them. The record label gets all of the payment for it, but they set up an artist development deal where they're basically going to make you famous for all of the rights to your music. So you kind of have to weigh whether or not you want that. What do you think of those? Do you think there are benefits to it, especially if you can get out when you're at your peak? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, because I got dropped by one, I kind of maybe have a different perspective on it. But I guess it really depends on what your goal is, right? If you want to be famous, it's going to take, you're going to have to give up a lot. But if you want to make a comfortable living and have a core group of fans, and you keep the rights to your music, if fame isn't important to you, you can keep the rights. I wouldn't sign away your rights if you want to give up the creative control. You don't have to with the way internet is. Does take a lot of, you kind of have to be a certain person. You have to have that I like the term musicpreneur, which is entrepreneur, but you have to think like an entrepreneur, where you see these opportunities and go for them. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're not getting screwed. So if you can build, like, for instance, I think Marshmello is kind of like an awesome example of like the way that you do it. Most of his music, you can, if you, regardless of whether or not you like it, his music is beside the point. What is amazing with .com and then transitioning into Marshmello is that he actually owns most of the rights to his music. And he is getting released by big labels, but he's at the position, like him and his artist manager, like they kind of, it was a different relationship. I forget who his artist manager is off the top of my head, but both of them are collaborating in the sense where, they really built a fan base and did it right.
His branding is, I've never
Yeah.
seen branding like his. It's unbelievable.
So the point is, you don't have to have a big label to do what somebody like Marshmello did. He just had the right
Team.
right team behind him. Same with Chance the Rapper. And you just have the right team, and you meet the right people at the right time. And I like the saying. There's a saying that I can't remember where it came from, but where preparedness meets opportunity is success. So when you're prepared for those opportunities, and then just sort of go for it. So yeah, I mean, there is kind of, if you're want to go kind of the route of hopefully getting signed by a big label to kind of take you to the next step, just kind of keep that in your back of mind. Especially these days and age in the internet, you really don't need a big label to do that. Like, I mean, taking Marshmello again as the example, he does have some stuff signed, but that with major labels now, but he's signing like individual tracks, which is unheard of. Like, this is complete new concept for the majors, because they realize, like, we're going at the shift where record labels are scrounging to stay relevant, and they're really not that relevant. They have to reinvent themselves, and so I think you're seeing less and less of that artist development being done by the label, just because of the fact that you really don't need them. So I think it really depends and on your situation and finding the right. I think it just comes down to the right team. A label can be very beneficial. Like, obviously, some of Marshmello's signings kind of now set him over the top and landed him the big residency in Las Vegas. But that's, he didn't start there. So
yeah.
I think that's the big takeaway, is that just because getting signed by a label doesn't mean you're going to have a successful career, because you can get dropped by one, as we hear by so many, and then you kind of have to pick up the pieces and figure out how to make it work.
And I think another thing that a lot of artists will disregard too. I get it too. I've been an artist and I've signed tracks, and it's exciting. It's a lot of fun. And you do feel like, oh, this is a big leap forward. Like, this is me going on to the next step. And I think a lot of artists disregard contracts. They understand the purpose of them and how serious they can be, but I don't think a lot of them look into them the way they should. And you can get into really shady spots, especially when you start getting hooked up with these bigger record labels, because a lot of these bigger record labels, they do want to take a majority of things, and there might be some sketchy clauses in there. I've got a buddy who I had no idea, but he is signed to a record label, but he has to provide them with like 6 or 7 tracks before he's basically cut from this contract. Now, it doesn't mean he needs to sign them, but the record label has first rights to every single track he writes that he wants to put out, which, in my opinion, is not a good position to be in. It's not terrible, because he can just send it to him, they say no, and then he can sign it with whoever he wants. But the fact of the matter is, if there's an even bigger record label that wants it, or you want to start self-distributing, well, too bad. You have to wait until this record label kind of releases you from that contract, so you can start putting out the tracks that you want at whatever time you want. So I think a lot of artists need to start either investigating themselves or investigating some of these contracts themselves, or find a lawyer, a music lawyer or something, or if you have a friend who's a music lawyer or is a lawyer, just someone who can help you out to review some of these contracts, and negotiate. Do not be afraid to negotiate. I think that's a huge deal. Is a lot of people are afraid to negotiate, especially when they're a newer artist getting their first track signed, or their first track with a big label signed. Don't be afraid to negotiate, because you have the power. If they're wanting to sign you, they want you for a reason. They see something in you, and you're providing them with content. So don't be afraid to negotiate, because I think a lot of artists lose out on a lot of big opportunities just because they're afraid to ask for something more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Let's get into how to stand out to fans and differentiating yourself, because I think this is I'd say this is the number one thing that artists struggle with today, is they don't know what to do. They feel like it's all been done. I'm sure you work with plenty of artists though who either you've helped figure out how to innovate themselves, or they just have come up with a great idea where it's like, oh yes, that's you now, and that's perfect. Run with that. What do you think is a good way for artists to figure out how to differentiate themselves and stand out from the crowd, from the rest of the thousands of producers out there all trying to claim their stake?
So I think I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but I think standing out from the crowd and differentiating yourself is kind of, I think artists fall in the trap of overthinking this.
Yeah.
And I think going back to what I was saying earlier about like being authentic to who you are and telling your story, like for example, let's say you like really love like surfing, or you really love like knitting, I don't know, or something
Gaming,
random like
whatever,
gaming,
yeah.
or or whatever your hobbies are that are beyond just music. I think people are kind of looking, and I think this kind of like is going back to like, if you think about your favorite artists and producers that are influencing your music, if you think about those people, why do you like, yes, obviously it's their music, but why do you connect with them? I think a lot of people that are, you get hurt, like you feel a little sad, like when David Bowie died or something like that. Why? It's like because they have a personality, and it's like they're a person, you're connecting with the person. So I think we forget about that. Whereas with, I think a lot of artists think, well, if I have to develop my brand, that means I have to be like a Coca-Cola or something. You're not a product. I mean, you are. It's kind of weird to think about it. You are a product, but at the end of the day, you're not. I think you have to be authentic of who you are, and like yourself kind of propels that music. So I don't know. I mean, there you can look at other producers and kind of, find 3 or 5 producers that you admire and like kind of figure out what their brands are, and then define what's unique and about you, and then your values, and like kind of your tone. If you're going to be an asshole like Deadmau5, or are you going to be like a super sweet guy or something, or
a comedian like Dylan Francis? I bring up Dylan Francis all the time because
or a comedian.
He's a perfect example of sharing his story through all of his comedy videos on Instagram, which are fucking hilarious. And he dips into like an outside brand too, because it is all comedy. A lot of people can relate to the comedy, so he gains fans that might not necessarily have been a fan of his music, but they eventually they eventually translate into his music and really enjoy it. So that's, go on.
So I think that's how you stand out, is just be who you are. I mean, you can, that's the thing. Like you can have a gimmick, like put a mouse head on or put a marshmallow on your head, but it's not going to necessarily work for you.
No,
if that's not who you are.
I don't think I wouldn't consider that branding either. Cause like you said, that is more like an asset, and that is a gimmick. Yeah. It's fun. Yeah. It's cool. Sometimes it can be unique, but it's not a brand. And I really like what you're talking about telling a story I think that is the answer for a lot of these producers and artists out there who and I got sucked into the trap too of like overthinking it. What's my brand? What's my sound? Who am I? What am I trying to do? And trying to come up with these intricate things and reinventing the wheel, when it's really just all about like, who are you? What's your story? Where do you come from? And I think a lot of this has to do with documenting stuff. Someone who I see as being of who's going to be a huge producer, I think, and definitely going to be full time with this is my buddy Richie, who's Sixth Street Music. He was on Sixth Street. He was on episode 4, and he's doing streaming on Twitch. So he does that twice a week, giving feedback to producers. He's creating such an engaging community of producers, but then he's also creating YouTube videos with his girlfriend, which is huge. He really is documenting his life and sharing a lot of his story. I think he said he was going to Europe, or India at the beginning of next year, around like January, and he's going to be doing a lot of like life video stuff, like what he's doing in his life, doing streams on Twitch, which is, I think that's going to just ignite his brand, because he's telling a story of himself and sharing his life and going through it. And, you know, we said at the beginning, there is a tipping point of oversharing too much. And some producers just might not be comfortable with sharing that much. You don't need to share that much, but I do think like sharing your process of what you're doing, what you're working on, how you came up with an idea, creating a 2-hour video of how you wrote a track. I think these kinds of things are great ways to share your story and what you're doing. And they're ways to develop a brand of yourself where people recognize you as that kind of person, or they can connect to your story a lot more than maybe another producer. And that's why they are more of a fan to you than anyone else.
Yeah, and I'll add that I think you need to really really hone in on who you're trying to reach, because I think, well, I'm going to put it out there, everybody's going to love my music. No, you have to actually get crystal clear on the person that is listening to your music. Actually, and this is something that that is really applicable to artists that come from the business world, is like, who is your avatar or your customer avatar? And what that means is essentially you kind of put a name to somebody, like, and kind of tell their story of who this person is. Like, they're like, for instance, like, they're a 24-year-old male.
This is their job.
This is their job.
They're a cook. They make $22,000 a year. Yep. They're on these websites. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then what you do is, like, this content that you're sharing, like, you think in the back of the mind, and I think the important thing is to name this person. It can be a fictitious person. And you're like, let's say, for example, his name's Matt. It's like, I'm going to produce this piece of content, whether it be a live stream or, or like a video or a meme or something like that. Is this something that Matt's going to like? And that's kind of informs on what kind of content you're creating. And now you can do that you can have multiple of those people, like, that you're trying to reach. Say one day you want to reach Matt, and then one day you want to reach Mary. That's more into, like, your feminine side if you're a male, or so it depends.
Sorry, to add on to that even further too. I think an important thing that a lot of producers don't think about either. Let's say you do come up with an avatar. The other thing too is to think about, okay, what you need to include in that, obviously, is their job and their income, and then figure out, well, when are they off? What times are they on Facebook? Okay, if they're a cook, they're probably on in the morning, not in the evening, and they're probably working weekends as well. So you can deduce, okay, I'm going to put out this piece of content for Matt, who's a cook, on Wednesday at 10 in the morning, because that's when Matt's waking up checking Instagram. And you're going to hit that target. You're going to hit your target, and they're going to get sucked in right away. Boom, you've got a new fan.
Yep. Exactly right. And the nice thing is we have tools to schedule that stuff now. So you don't have to be constantly on social media all the time, because you do need to, after all, make time to produce music.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, obviously. Yep. Obviously.
Yes. So you use those automation tools to your advantage.
Mm-hmm, so. Definitely. Awesome. Well, do you have anything else to say in regards to all this stuff, Adam? Obviously, plug yourself, plug Teknofonic. Where can people? I know there's a Facebook community that I think everyone who listens to this should join.
Yeah, so we sponsor a Facebook group, a free mastermind community called just look for electronic musicians, and basically it's just a mastermind community. You can share your music to get feedback. You can ask for advice on anything. We also post content that we're creating over at Teknofonic. We do have at Teknofonic, I do host these master classes, which we do have a pro membership where it gives you free access to those master classes as well as a video library. We have well over 20 hours of content with interviews with professionals, industry professionals and professional producers giving inside look into how their tracks were made, as well as, artists or professional music entrepreneurs that on various aspects of branding to, getting your music in TV and film, to finding the right artist manager. We had Rick Barker, who's Taylor Swift's former manager, on do a master class. So we have, all this content in there as for pro membership, but you can also sign up and register to attend one of our webinars at any time. But yeah, so check us out, and we're obviously here to help. We go more in depth with this whole. I mean, that's what Teknofonic is. It's an artist development community, and we know it's rough out there, so we're here to help facilitate that, help you navigate this crazy industry that we're in. So we have the free community, and then you get more attention in the paid community, but definitely check out the Electronic Musicians Facebook group.
Yeah, awesome. I love what you guys are doing at Teknofonic. I love the Electronic Musicians group. It's an important community to have, and producers need to be more involved in these communities, because like you were saying before, so many producers, this is something I constantly bring up in the show, a lot of producers see each other as competition. It's not. You might end up collaborating with that person. You're working together to build something. Like, you're not in competition. As you said before, a rising tides raise all ships. So we all can rise up together if we all stick together. It's super important. Do you have any words of wisdom before we leave?
Yeah, I think find your own community, and then build your own community as well. Mm-hmm. That with your fans. I mean, there's a great book by Seth Godin, Tribes, which he talks about building. You're basically building a tribe around your brand, and it's more for business, but it really applies to us. I mean, we're building communities around our music, and then go out and find communities to be a part of, to share ideas. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Adam. And everyone, I'm in the Electronic Musicians group. I stay engaged in that group too. So if you have any questions, I'm there as well. You'll see me talking to people. So it's, it's important to get us all involved in these communities for them to actually work. So definitely get involved with that. And I appreciate everything you're doing, Adam. Everyone at Teknofonic, it's super exciting.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you have a wonderful night, man. Take care.
You too.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode, guys. As always, head to Apple Podcasts to rate and review the show. Don't forget to subscribe and share the show with a friend that you think could benefit from it. I actually just started up a Facebook group for this community. It's called Electronic Dance Money Community. Look it up on Facebook. You should be able to see it with the show logo. I want that entire community to just be a complete business resource for you guys as producers. So there isn't going to be any production talk, mixing, or mastering talk. It is strictly for you guys to ask questions and share knowledge about being an entrepreneur and running a music business specifically for electronic musicians. Again, thanks so much, and I will see you guys next episode.